But it must be operationally an interesting challenge if you're the foreign minister in particular, and you've got a rolling series of international challenges. India's an important country, so you've got people rolling in the door to Delhi all the time. And then you're in the upper house with this wafer-thin parliamentary situation. So I would encourage your whip to adopt a generous, human approach to the demands of the minister. I'm sure you'll be urging him to do the same. You're here in New York. It's General Assembly Week. What's the core message this week for the Indian government that you and Prime Minister Modi are seeking to deliver to the international community?
Well, I think the big issue before the world and before the United Nations right now is how we're all going to deliver or not on these Sustainable Development Goals. In a sense, I say this. This is a analytical observation. I think whether the world would be successful in achieving SDG targets would be dependent on whether India would be successful, because our numbers are so big here. If you see what's happened in the last 5 years, actually a lot of the changes in India are led by national campaigns, very often directly, personally pushed by the Prime Minister. Campaigns about gender, closing the gender gap, education. Campaigns about digital connectivity, about cleanliness, about sanitation, about urbanization, about education, about skills. So you've had actually a range of these initiatives. Now, these are not just slogans. If you look at the raw numbers, for example, there was a push to get people really poor people to open bank accounts. Okay, they opened up 300 million bank accounts. But more important, in those 5 years, actually $60 billion went into those 300 million bank accounts. They pushed for microfinance. Microfinance, particularly with a bias towards women. 75% of the users were women. They got 260 million microfinance accounts opened up. If you look at rural housing, last 5 years, about close to 18 million rural homes. Gas connections, because Indian women very heavily use firewood, and firewood is a killer. Literally it's a killer. It's like smoking multiple packs of cigarettes a day. They've got close to 100 million, 96 million new users of cooking gas who were enabled by the fact that he could appeal to people like me to give up our cooking gas connections, which we were getting at subsidized rates. So these are all, what's shifting in India. The story on girls' education, and which interestingly is linked to building of toilets, because girls didn't go to school because often there were no toilets in school. So if you got about 100 million toilets built, you also had an impact on many millions of girls going to school. And the moment you do something like school going, you're actually raising awareness. You are delaying marriage, dates, ages in a way. You are improving health. You're also making people aware of the fact that they need to space out their kids. That has consequences. The demographic consequences, it has health consequences. So all of that is happening. And I think in a sense, when I look at governance at home, I sit in cabinet meetings where, typically foreign policy is a very small element of it. The bulk of what I hear there is actually SDG at work. And I think some of those messages will actually come through out here.
Yeah, for my sins, I'm chairman of Sanitation and Water for All. Which is
I'm aware of that.
So we're responsible globally as the civil society organisation for Sustainable Development Goal number 6. So the proof point of what you just said is, we'll succeed in SDG 6 if you succeed in India. It's pretty simple. And having been to India many times, and most recently when you were doing a major public promotion for Swachh Bharat, which is Prime Minister Modi's program for Clean India, including the principal question of ending open defecation and dealing with the widespread availability and use of toilets. The numbers are impressive. And I'm aware of the domestic debate about whether the numbers are all real or not, but let's just say you take a 10 or 20% discount.
Could I comment on that?
It's still a big achievement. Yeah.
Look, let me tell you what proves that the numbers were real. The fact that the numbers...
He became a politician already.
Okay. The numbers are real because finally they gave you real numbers in the voting booth.
Yeah.
If you ask the question, why did the government led by Mr. Modi not just get re-elected, got re-elected by about, I think, almost 8 to 10% votes more than they had. Those numbers led to these numbers. So there's a direct connection between what we delivered on the ground in the last 5 years and what was the voter behavior. Because if you ask people, so why did you, because you know the speculation, there were people who said with great confidence that the numbers would drop.
Yeah.
Okay. And the last time I was here in Asia Society, we were having those conversations. Not in public, but we were. But I think the reason why the numbers went up, and in any democratic exercise, if in one term your numbers go up, your voter base increases by about 10%. It's a remarkable achievement. And I think the reasons for that were twofold. The primary reason was that on the ground, people saw change. And typically, at least in India, where voters can be very impatient, you are elected with a lot of hope, then 5 years down the road, there's impatience on the part of the voter.
Yeah.
But I think 5 years down the road, clearly they believed that Mr. Modi was still the best harbinger of change, and probably now implementer of change. And the other, of course, was the national security side. I think they just felt it was a safer pair of hands.
So your overall argument about the outcome of the May elections was that 5 years ago he actually triggered a significant, let's call it, set of social revolutions against the list that you just referred to before, which are also consistent with global development goals. And that actually has expanded the constituency for the BJP.
Yes. I think it's also that 5 years ago, people looked at his record in Gujarat and hoped that, this would, the developmental progress would kind of achieve national scale. I think that was the 2014 voting behavior. I think the 2019 voting behavior was, okay, we've seen him for 5 years, we've seen what his government looks like, we've seen how serious he is about delivering on all of this, and we actually believe this. So
they're starting to see evidence,
and therefore let's give him another term and see where he can take us.
Good. You mentioned the Sustainable Development Goals. One of them deals with climate, and of course you've got the UN Climate Summit this week as we prepare for 5 years into the Paris Treaty. What's India's formal policy? What are your Paris commitments? Are you meeting them, and will you be expanding on those commitments between now and 2030?
Well, my first point I'd make is that there's a big attitudinal shift, on climate change, and
in India.
In India,
okay,
till a few years ago, people looked at climate change as something that was growing awareness. But it was also looked at as an international negotiation.
Yeah.
This was all about, because Kyoto kind of captured the whole climate change issue. And you know the story of Kyoto. The promises made and the promises not kept. So the difference between Kyoto and Paris was that, and there was a transition through Copenhagen in between. The difference, yes, I wasn't, but I got some graphic accounts of things which happened there. But I had
a fight with the Indians.
At Paris, I think the difference was that we took the view that, look, if it is really existential, then you can't say on the one hand it's existential, but it's subject to nitty-gritty of bargaining. And I think we decided that we would actually take the lead on addressing the climate change challenges. I saw actually, how much the Prime Minister was involved in actually structuring the compromises which led to Paris. We used to be traveling and on the phone taking calls all the time. I think a lot of our views and positions influenced the G77, definitely. But what we did actually outside the Paris conference was, to my mind, the more important outcome for us and for the world, which was decided we take the lead on advocating and implementing the spread of solar energy. And we unveiled what was actually the most ambitious solar program to date. We started something called the International Solar Alliance, which has spectacularly taken off. Today we have a very ambitious, the target was 175 gigawatts. We are on our way to meeting that. We've also, much of our development assistance in Africa, in Caribbean, in Pacific Islands is geared around providing solar projects. And in fact, on my way here, I saw a very interesting analysis by the by the Climate Action Tracker, which you're familiar with it. And what the analysis said was that there were 2 countries who actually exceeded their nationally determined contributions. One is Morocco. I forget who was the other one. There were 5 countries who have delivered on it with the 2 degree as meeting the 2 degree benchmark. And the 5 countries are Bhutan, which is not a surprise, Costa Rica, Ethiopia, Philippines, and India. So actually, when it comes to delivering on Paris commitments, frankly, it appears from what I read. I haven't discussed it with my own colleagues who deal with climate change, but from what I can gather, actually, it seems to be doing better than much of Europe and a lot of other countries.
Well, it's a bit like everything else. The Trump relationship. Personally, I could think of no 2 more dissimilar personalities than Narendra Modi and Donald Trump. These are like chalk and cheese. These are just completely different people. But, my friend, it seems to be working. So what's the actual substance of this relationship? What are its principal opportunities and tensions right now? Can you navigate it through to, obviously, the end of next year? And if there's a Trump re-elect beyond that?
Well, look, where the Houston event was concerned, I mean, I regard it in many ways really as a tribute to the Indian American community. That you had, their ability today to organize themselves, to motivate themselves, to do an event of this scale. I mean, they had 50,000 people in the stadium, and I don't know how many people outside the stadium. And this is not the first time. I mean, it started in Madison Square Garden 5 years ago.
I remember.
Then we did something a little bigger at San Jose the next year. So this is the 3rd time, and they've grown in scale. Now, the fact that they can do this speaks in many ways of some of the strengths of our relationship with the United States, and those are structural strengths. I mean, it shows today that the U.S. is still, in many ways, a land of equal opportunity for, certainly, that's how many Indian Americans would feel. And that they have really, and it was a very bipartisan event. I mean, while President Trump obviously got a lot of the attention, but he was preceded on the stage by the majority leader, Steny Hoyer. So again, that speaks of the political, bandwidth of the Indian American community. So we do see the community today as one of the key pillars of the relationship, and one of the many factors which have created a new paradigm between India and the United States, which has evolved over the last 20 years. There are other factors as well, business factors, geopolitical factors. But in regard to the President and the Prime Minister, look, I saw them the first time when I met in Washington in 2017. And, sometimes even if people are not the same, they hit it off. I mean, it's very visible that they, when they meet, that they bond well. When you ask, saying, okay, where is this going? I think one difference for us in India, Indians themselves are very adjustable people by nature. It's part of our DNA. Secondly, Prime Minister Modi is a very outgoing person. So if it's you and me and we are very different, he kind of shifts gears and responds to you in a way in which it works with you, and with me in a way in which it works with me. So you've had 2 very different presidents, Obama and Trump, back to back. But he's actually
That's probably the understatement of the morning.
Yes. But he's had very, very warm, cordial, personal.
He had a great relationship with Barack.
With both of them. But it's also, there's a larger issue here, which is, remember, we are not. We don't have the history with the United States and with American leaders, which many other countries do. So because we don't have that history, when there is change, we don't have those anxieties. A large part of what you see in East Asia or what you see in Europe are actually leaders fretting, because today's reality is a departure from the norm. Okay. With India, there was no norm. We were still a relationship very much in progress. So for us, okay, there's one more adjustment to be made. It's